try to keep really good on who we talk to. If you could just in the chat box, go ahead and put your name and what agency you're or what truancy program you are associated with. Um, as you all know, if you've been through one of these webinars, the format is we talk for about 15 or 20 minutes about just kind of what we measured this year, the time frames, important variables, and then you'll have an opportunity at the end to go into a breakout room and have one-to-one time. If we have too many truancy programs that want to have discussion, it's no sweat. We'll just set up a one-to-one time with you individually, because the goal is really for you to fully understand what we've reported on. And then always, like, if you're like, hey, this doesn't look right, we try to re-pull the data and examine it again. So I think most of you know me. I'm Dr. Ann Hobbs. I'm the director of JGI for about the next month, but I'll be around forever, I'm sure, for a long time. Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Michelle Looters, and I'm the program specialist that helps out with the evidence-based Nebraska reports and some of the emails that go back and forth. I help out with that. So with that, Sadie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Sadie Brewer, and I'm a PhD student working with the JJI, and I help go through some of the analyses and get the reports written up and ready to go.
Super. And then Emily Rader is a consultant that's been working with us, and Faith will probably be joining us. It is finals week, so kudos to you students who are showing up. So I'll go ahead and get started, but please do remember to put your name in the chat. And then I can't see the chat box, so I'll have somebody else. If you have a question, you can raise your hand or you can put it in the chat box. So, and Michelle and Sadie, tell me if it doesn't forward. I think it just forwarded, but okay. So this year, one of the things that we did when we sat down at the beginning of our contract, we worked with the Crime Commission, and they wanted us to look back and still evaluate some timeframes that we had covered before. So we are looking at the timeframe July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. And sometimes we get a complaint like, hey, that's a delayed report. It absolutely is. When recidivism is one of your key measurable outcomes, that's why there's that delay. But we try to give some meaningful outcomes that are intermediate goals at the same time. So we'll talk through those. You might see on your report that I don't know if this applies to many truancy programs, but sometimes we see programs are funded for part of the time, not funded for part of the time. So we're starting to do some kind of trend analysis at JJI. So you can start to see like, are there years or timeframes that I'm busier or more successful or more effective? And then we try to write up some pretty clear recommendations if we can see something from your data. It's tough, like it's tough looking at numbers and then interpreting that to meaningful steps for all of you. But sometimes the data like does totally speak to you. You can see if you're not hitting any of the desired outcomes, maybe it's time to tweak something. So that's really the goal. That's every program type has a measured outcome for whether or not they're effective. So for truancy programs, the ultimate variable is really our kids attending school more often after they work with you. But along the line, we'd like to see things like community engagement, or school engagement increase, and maybe grades. So all of this program design evaluation is really about helping programs like if you can tweak something in your program or change an intervention to improve the outcome, that's really the goal. So that's the reports that you've gotten. These reports are really designed to be useful to you or your staff, like determine, how you put staff into play or patterns, like if there's months that are busier, and to really walk away from this process with something tangible that you could try in this next year. I get that with the year delay, it's tricky because sometimes programs like what you were doing in 2023 is no longer applicable. So I get that. The other thing I'm sure all of you know after listening to me for years and years is that to do this, to answer questions about whether or not a program is effective, you need enough cases. For the most part, this year, I think we had pretty good data. So when we're measuring things like is attendance improving or youth engaging at school more, And are we keeping youth out of the system? There's different variables that we collect for all of those. So improving attendance is really that school data pre and post that all of you so diligently put in. But school engagement is a measure that you also put in, like measuring and capturing whether or not you feel the youth is engaged at the beginning of the process and the end. And then recidivism, I'll talk more in depth about in a minute. We call it future system involvement because some of your kiddos haven't even been in the system at all, so it can't be recidivism technically. And then to answer these questions, like you have to have enough cases. So typically, if we have less than 10 cases, we get a little about making, solid determinations from that data. And less than 5, really, it's not a great sample. Even if you have 100 cases, though, if you don't have any attendance data, we can't answer that question. So for the most part, though, programs are really getting solid on entering the data pre and post. So pretty good this year. So things like attendance are really unique to truancy programs or school-based programs, but other measures are set across all the program types in Nebraska right now. And the reason is it's set in statute. So these are the future system involvement or recidivism variables. And the reason they're this way is because in statute, it literally says, like, one of the determinations if a program is effective is, are they keeping kids from getting deeper in the system? So most of you know that we measure these we look at 4 different ways that a kid can be future system involved. They could have a status offense or a law violation. And how we measure that is 1 year after they complete your program, does the court system show that a county attorney filed a case against this youth? So sometimes we get questions about, like, what if a youth is discharged from your program and because of a new law violation? We do try to put some days in between. Roughly 45 to 50 days after discharge is when we start looking, because otherwise it's conflated with kids that are unsuccessful, right? So we try to really have a good definition is, are kids that have finished your program and enough time's gone by, do they then within a year's time frame have a law violation or a status offense? And I'm happy to go in depth, like when we go into one-to-one, if you have questions about the different definitions of status and law violations, and we also have those on our website. The other things we look at, though, are does that youth eventually get adjudicated to probation or go to detention? And both of those we look at any point after they've discharged from your program. We do know that takes time, right? And sometimes that means they've had a law violation and they go on to those things. But it's interesting to see, like, there's some programs that really the kids seem to jump off over all the steps and just end up in detention. So it's an interesting way to look at your outcomes for your programs and also maybe to design. Usually when we see that a lot of kids are on probation, it means they were right at that doorstep as you were serving them. So it might give you some information for how to tweak your intervention so it's more applicable to kids that are on probation. Okay, so reading your report, if you see anything on the screen and you're like, hey, that looks like my report, we try to de-identify all of these. So we take sections from different reports and then you'll see County X. That's just so no one report is out there. This is really your data. You can take it to your county board, you can put it on your website, you can do whatever you'd want with it. If JJI is going to use it, we would reach out to you and ask you for permission. So if you're like, hey, these numbers don't match on these demographics or on the things that I'm showing you, it's because we've pulled from different reports. So when you're reading your report, this is a different design. Like I said, we're going to ask you to weigh in on whether you like this or if you prefer the old way that we've done them. But I'll just kind of go through, like, the first column here shows just basic race and ethnicity demographics of who you're serving in your program. So you can see in this particular program, 86% of the youth served. It was 12 youth, but 86% were white. Then gender, same kind of thing. It's just basic, straightforward. How many are male? How many are female? And then how many are in high school? So you can see in this particular example, 71% of the youth were in high school, but they are serving some youth in elementary school as well and middle school. And then on this side of the screen, we're looking at what type of intervention they're doing. And most of the youth in this program, the 178 youth pie chart here that we're looking at, 95% are coming through as diversion kids. So they're a little bit higher risk level, right? They're more involved in the system already, and probably almost always referred from the county attorney in that case. And you can see of these then, and you'll see that's whited out the county. We do look to see how many youth enroll in the program, particularly in truancy programs. This is probably not surprising. Kids don't show up, right? So truancy programs tend to have lower enrollment rates and lower success rates, across the board and across the state. It's just that way, right? Like showing up is one of their obstacles, and so we see that happen in the program as well. Um, on this next section, what we did is we compared Department of Ed data. So the Department of Education in Nebraska puts out data by county, and I think in some areas maybe by school, but we report mostly out on county. And what we're looking at, Department of Ed reports on which youth are enrolled and then which youth show up as chronically absent. And the bar chart should show you, in a perfect world, you would probably be targeting your interventions and reaching out to youth that are chronically absent in your county. So for example, these charts, this screen's a little bit hard to read. Nebraska Department of Education shows that Alaska Indian or Alaska American Indian or Alaska Native were 9% of the chronically absent population, but this particular program is serving 0%. So that's something to just kind of ask yourself, like, is there an entity you could work with? Is there a nonprofit locally? Or is it a diversion program? Like, well, where's the miss there? Because ideally you would be serving youth that NDE has identified as chronically absent. I get that these were, like, let's say these cases were referred by the county attorney, then the program has no control over that. So that would be a discussion maybe to have with your county attorney. However, if your referrals are coming directly from the school, maybe check your school and see, because maybe their demographics aren't 11% or 9% Native American. So really working with your local school on getting those referrals. This isn't a perfect measure, but it's close. It's closer than county population. So that's why we use NDE data. On this part of your chart, what you'll see is who's enrolling in the program. And it's by fiscal year. So in the chart that you're looking at, you can see this program seems to be hitting some consistency. It looks like they're going to be enrolling about 17 to 20 kids annually. And it looks like it's increasing, like fiscal year 22, 23 saw an increase. The other thing that's important to look at, just what percent of youth are enrolling. This is really high for a truancy program, 95% enrollment. And the next thing would be to look at the success rate, just because truancy programs have trouble enrolling kids. So the next screens you should be looking at, I think it's not a screen, it's your page. You want to look at what percent of youth are successfully discharged. This is actually really high for a truancy program. So if you're not seeing 71%, be assured that this is something that's this is a pretty high success rate. In this particular program, 71% were successfully discharged, and then an additional 15% graduated. So that's extremely high. We try to also break down what do the unsuccessful cases look like. Partially because it's interesting, we're seeing a lot of kids move to homeschool post-COVID. This is a really big thing. Transferring schools is always a really common discharge reason for truancy programs. Dropping out would be something a program maybe pay attention to. So looking at those reasons that kids don't successfully complete might give you an idea on how to tap in or incentivize participation. But I don't want it to sound easy at all. We tried to do surveys with the program years ago, and we couldn't even get families to show up when we were like giving them pizza and daycare, right? Like, so I get getting kids to your truancy programs is super tough. The other thing that's really important is when we looked at outcomes for truancy programs, we're looking for, is there improvement in attendance, but is it statistically significant? So when something's statistically significant, you can assure that it's happening. We just don't always know why there's a change. So sometimes we see programs that attendance actually got worse. So in this particular example at the bottom on my screen, you'll see students in this program saw a significant increase in overall absences from pre-program to enrollment. So when we look at attendance, you probably all know this because you enter the data, but we're looking at like those semesters before they ever met you, they ever come to your program's door, like how often were they absent? And in this case, youth were absent on average 14%. And then while they were enrolled in the program, it went up to 25%, and that was statistically significant. So this would be something to really pay attention to, and we'll see it when we get to the scores that you get. It's really that's an outcome we really shouldn't see for an attendance program. So it's really important to ask why. Now it might be that you had really tough kids that during this time frame, and so you can pull their profile IDs and be like, oh, this is why. Or it might be that you had some staffing challenges, right? So there's some story behind this, but as researchers, unless we do a deep, deep dive on your program, we only know that it's statistically significant and that attendance got worse. We don't see that, thankfully, across many attendance programs. Usually we see attendance improve, but sometimes not statistically so, especially if you're a smaller program. Tardies, sometimes we see attendance overall improves and tardies gets worse. We tried to bump those out of the evaluation this year because I had lots of discussions about, hey, if a kid's tardy, even if they have more tardies, it means they're at school, right? Like that's a good thing. That's a positive outcome. When we met with the Crime Commission, they wanted us to keep it in the outcome, so we've kept it in. But like I said, I think if kids are tardy to school, that's probably not terrible, but some schools do count that as absence, so it's included in the report. And then I've talked already about looking at attendance. On your reports, you have excused, unexcused, and then total tardies. And you'll see, try always to pay attention to the number. So it'll say N equals. So sometimes if you see like, oh my gosh, 98% of my kids, their attendance got worse, but it was 2 kids. So sometimes that helps you understand the story behind a particular outcome. And then we try to always narrate, like if you're like, I don't understand what these bars mean, you should always see a narrative that explains whether it was statistically significant and what that means for your program. Okay, so I'm gonna talk through one last thing and then I'm gonna open it up just broadly for questions. But as I mentioned at the beginning, future system involvement is an outcome that when the Nebraska legislature established community-based aid and wrote the Juvenile Justice Institute into it, that was one of their important outcomes. They wanted to know, do our programs across the state keep kids from getting deeper and deeper into the system? So that's exactly how we look at it. You can see in this particular case, there were 50 youth, and only 4% had a status offense, but it was 2 youth. So the red on this screen indicates at least one violation. It's phrased that way because one youth can have multiple violations. So these 2 kids who had a status offense might also be this one kid who had a law violation. So just so you know that that's how you look at that. We're always we try to compare successfully closed cases to unsuccessfully closed cases. And theoretically, the reason is we're thinking if a youth goes through your program and you've spent, months working with them or sometimes years in truancy programs, that long term, we're hoping that translates to reduced system involvement, that there's some kind of interactions that we're having in our programs that reduce like status and law violations. For status and law violations, we only look for 1 year post-discharge. So, but the other 2, probation and detention, are at any point. That's not, sometimes programs are like, well, I can't, assure a kid's never going to break the law, and we totally get that. It's just interesting to look at it because it does speak sometimes to the risk of the youth that you're working with. Okay. So this year, one of the other things that's different in these reports is we used an evaluation matrix, and it's specific to the program that you are working with. So today's reports are all about truancy, right? So what we're looking at on the matrix, we're looking at, did the youth have improved attendance? So here at the bottom, improved attendance at discharge. Did the percent of youth, did they show an increased engagement in school, and did they have improved grades? The only one of the, no, we looked for statistical significance for all of those, and then also future system involvement. So do the kids who move through your program have low future system involvement? And then when we compare successful to unsuccessful, are successful kids less likely to have to break the law in the future or have a status events? We obviously reported out on some of the other kind of variables like race and gender and age and a comparison between NDE data and yours, but you weren't rated on those at all. So if you look at your matrix, it looks like this. We sat down with the Crime Commission and agreed upon, worked out the point system. And so you can see total points for truancy programs, I think it was like 22.5. I've worked with so many different programs, the points change by program type. And so for each of these, kind of your mid-range is if you're showing success, but it's not statistical, that's kind of this middle white column. For attendance, like you get points even if it's not statistically significant because it's hard to get kids to show up, right? It's hard work. If you're achieving statistical significance, you get higher points, obviously. And then if, in the case that we saw earlier, if attendance is getting worse, you can actually get negative points. So because of that, when you look at the score bar, you can see in this case it ranges in the promising to effective range, but there are programs that are getting into this no effect range, and that's usually because we're seeing outcomes that are the opposite of what we want. So these are all things that are kind of different from this in this year's report compared to last year's report. You will definitely have an opportunity to weigh in on these. Like I said, if you're coming in person to Community-Based Aid Conference in June, I strongly encourage you to take the survey while you're there, but otherwise, we'll have a little flyer for you or you'll get an email. So that is coming. As I mentioned at the beginning, we really try to narrate these. We were asked to do a little bit more statistical analysis this year, and so you might see some of that in your write-up. I think that's really important. Like as a research agency, it's important to have things be kind of mathematically correct, but we also want them to be very accessible. So I don't want it to just read like math to you. So if you got that and you feel like your recommendations aren't clear, I want you to tell us that and let us know that. But the importance of looking at things more statistically, like if you just describe what happens, it doesn't tell you scientifically whether or not you're making a change. And so I think the direction this year is really it's hitting a higher standard. So you might feel that in your report if you're like, hey, last year I got promising and this year I'm not or last year I got effective and this year I'm promising. That might be the reason if you had a score go down. As I mentioned, we tried to write in the recommendations pretty specifically, things to look at. But attendance programs are tough. Like getting kids to school is tough, and then getting them to engage in your program you're fighting the same battle the school is. And there's lots of variables playing into it, right? It can be a kid who's watching a baby brother or baby sister, or it could be they're working for their family or they're playing video games, right? So doing some kind of assessment is going to be the best way to improve your program. All right. If you also have any school-based programs, there's an upcoming webinar this afternoon, or the diversion reports will release those at the Community-Based Aid Conference. And then prevention and promotion programs will be at the end of June. We'll do the webinar. So before we go into individual breakout, is there any just general questions about the reports this year or and if Sadie or Michelle, if you don't mind just watching the chat box, that'd be great. Oh, I can see it. Woohoo.
And this is Kelly Munoz. I have a question, and I'm just wondering if anybody else is experiencing this. So I have one school that this year I have noticed when the kids have like quite a few missed days, if they come in and make up that time, then the school will remove the ones they will remove it, like past attendance, like missed days. So I have a problem with that because what my numbers are showing and what I when I go back and double check what it's showing on the school system is
Mhm.
different. But if I go back and change, it's gonna look like I'm over serving these kids.
Um,
I've just been keeping it the same as what, originally it was. I just want to make sure that that's what I should be doing because I don't want to look like I'm over serving a kid when they were at like 20 days and now they're only at 12 days.
yeah, if you're doing that percentage calculation in JCMS, keep it the same because I mean you can communicate that with your school building. I mean you can tell them that, hey, I track this the day they come in. So if you guys are making substantive changes next week, it's gonna show the kid was 50% absent the day they walked through my door. So I would keep it accurate as of the day you get the youth. And as long as you're consistently doing that, and like I said, you can communicate that to the school, but it shouldn't be a substantive change, right? I mean, even if they tweak it a little bit and discount, or, like it happens across the board, a youth's parent will call in after you've pulled the attendance and they were, counted as excused versus unexcused. So those minor things will wash out in the data. That won't be a problem, but it shouldn't be big changes. Like they shouldn't go from, let's say, 50% absent down to 20%. That shouldn't happen with the school.
Right. And that's what I've noticed that's how it came about is I had a girl that was at 18 days
Ooh.
when I got her. And now, like, I don't know, last week or whatever, I went back and then double checked everything just to make sure I'm still keeping track correctly. And it's back to 12 days now. So,
Yeah, I would just count it the day they walk in and then just let the attendance secretaries know that if this changes, it's not going to be reflective in my data.
okay.
And I'm
So
assuming it gets
in
worse.
JCMS, should I make a note of that? Or,
Yeah, I would put a note if you can put it a note like in the narrative of that case, because it probably doesn't happen in every case. But if it's happening in every case, definitely have a meeting
it
with
is
this.
happening in every case in my one school. And I think I only have one school that is doing that, but it's happening in every single case in that school.
Weird.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
That's, does anybody else have the same pattern? Because that's unusual. I mean, for it to happen in like, right? Every single youth.
Well, I mean, as long as they're
Hmm.
coming in and making up the time at the school, then they will take away a missed day.
Hmm.
Yeah, ours is similar, but the schools know I don't count that. Like you can do that if you want to do that, but absences are absences. And we count them, I mean, excused or non, schools send a notice to us when they hit that 20 days. Then we
Mhm.
just screen and determine, our level of involvement. So we don't even I mean, I guess we probably do things a little bit different, but however the school wants to do it, they can do that. But on our end, you miss days, your butt's not in the seat.
Mhm.
That's the way it is. You're going to hear from me.
Yeah, and I wonder what county attorneys like. I wonder if a county attorney would still file on it if a kid's way over, but then the school adjusts it. That's interesting. Hmm.
I don't
Oh, I
think
know
you
here in
dare
Holt
file
County,
on
they
it.
won't do it. They won't file, our county attorney won't file on it if it changes with the school. So,
Got it.
Yeah, I've noticed some what I would call monkeying with attendance,
Monk.
and it's frustrating.
Yeah, from your perspective, I think because you're dealing with like kind of mathematics, I would just capture the attendance when the kid walks through the door. And if the kid starts working on it, great, right? And then you should see that hopefully in their post attendance or while they're enrolled in your program. So, there are a fair number of people on the call. If you don't mind, if you would like to do a one-to-one breakout, if you don't mind putting your name in the chat, and then Sadie or Michelle will help us get into the right breakout room. And if you're like, I can't wait because it looks like we do have quite a few, you could just put your name in the box and we can follow up with you or in the chat box. and we can follow up and set up a time to go through your report. It's totally up to you. Or you can just put yourself on mute and we'll call you. So, okay, I see a question from Michelle. What is considered unsuccessful if the youth transfers to a homeschool? Oh, why is it? I need to go back and look at the definitions that we came up with. So when we sit down with the Crime Commission and we use uniform definitions at the very beginning of the cycle, we agreed upon certain things are classified as unsuccessful. So transferring to a different school or transferring to a home school, I believe are both counted as unsuccessful versus graduating even if it wasn't because of the program is counted as successful. It's arbitrary, like that might be a super great outcome for that individual youth, but across the state to keep definitions uniform, that's what we use. I will say if truancy programs across the board feel like that should be successful, that's a discussion that I'd encourage you to have. I think in some counties that I've talked to, though, it's viewed as avoiding the consequences that are happening at the school. So I get that it's a muddy water, right? For some kids, it's a super great outcome for that kid. And then other cases, maybe it's an avoidance thing. So for uniformity, it's a little bit random, but that's how it's classified. Great question. Great question. Just curiosity, on the programs that are on now, how many of you would view transferring to homeschool as a successful outcome? Can
I was
you?
just gonna tell you, Mary's gonna make the copies of this one. Thanks, Alvarado.
Sorry,
Yeah.
we might be on need to mute. Yeah, thanks. Does anybody think that should be a successful outcome? Transferring to homeschool or transferring to any school, I would say. Okay. Yeah, it's
That's a
tricky.
tough question.
Yeah, I
Because
know.
in some kids, it's a definite win, and in other kids, it's absolute avoidance, especially
Yeah.
if mom doesn't enroll them in any curriculum, mom or dad.
So I totally agree. That's exactly what we see as we have that discussion. Like sometimes they're homeschooled and nobody's seeing any real school happening. But there are ways, I see you in the comment box. So there are ways, I think that programs, like if a youth is really successfully transitioning onto something, graduating is a perfect example, right? It's not necessarily something that program did, but I think I've seen programs also wrap up the case if that's really a successful move for the kid and then close it as successful. So I think if you feel really strongly that this kid's successful and I've completed this case and they've done 85% or whatever, I see programs closing them as successful. So that's another option if you feel strongly about it. Okay. So I think we can move to individual sessions. If you're like, I really want to talk more about this, feel free like to do that in the one-to-one rooms or whatever's best for your schedule.
Okay, so Dr. Hobbs, I've got a link for a survey that we want people to fill out. If you can click on that link, click. And I see Leslie from Lancaster County. You would like a one-on-one session. Is there anybody else that you want a part of your room?
Yes.
Still here?
Includes Sarah Hoyle, Brady Foley, Jess Moser, and Tammy, I don't see her on this, but oh yeah, Tammy Rumble.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording here, Claire.